What if I, like Martin Luther said, the book of Revelation shouldn't even belong in the Bible? What would be a response to that? What I'm trying to do is get at some of the stuff that we went through last week. So there's just a little hint there. Why do we accept the book of the Revelation in the Bible?
You go to the book of Genesis, don't you? No?
What was that?
I said, you're talking about the book of Genesis.
Okay, what about the book of Genesis?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. That's part of the study questions that I had you do. Yeah.
Because Jesus wanted us to know about his region.
Okay, I think I'm thinking a little bit broader than that. Why is it in our Bible? Martin Luther didn't believe it should be. Why do we accept it in our Bibles? How do you know that? Have you ever read the Gospel according to Philip? It has Jesus all over that.
It has the 4 tests.
What do you mean the 4 tests?
The books in Canon, how we got our Bible. It either had to be written by an apostle or close association to the apostles.
Okay, so let's stop right there. It had to have been written by an apostle or a close associate. How do you know it was written by an apostle?
It says I, John.
John could have been anybody. Oh, I'm really pushing, huh? This is like a 3-ticket question. How do we know it was the Apostle John and not just John Schmo?
To Simon Peter, servant and apostle of Jesus Christ.
Okay, that's the opening to 1 Peter.
Oh, wait.
It also says it's talking about the 7 churches.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we know who that John presided over.
How do we know? There we go. Tradition tells us that. And where do we find church tradition? In the
Church Fathers.
Fathers, that's it. That's it. What were some of the earliest attestations of the Fathers about the book of Revelation as to who wrote it?
Irenaeus.
Irenaeus was one. That's always a good standby. Anyone earlier? I mentioned someone earlier.
St. Jerome?
Jerome came much later.
Justin,
St. Justin Martyr, who died at 165 AD. He was one of the first, earliest Christian witnesses to John the Apostle's attestation to its authorship. So we have him, we have Irenaeus. Anyone else? Who else? Did someone say Clement? No, someone said Cyril. St. Clement of Alexandria, 200 AD, also attests. There are many others that do so prior to the 4th century. So we have good early Christian witness from a very early on that attests to its apostolic origin. In other words, the earliest witness of the Fathers for the first 300 years of the church were almost unanimous that it was written by John, the beloved apostle. That view had not really been challenged until the Greek fathers started looking at it at a different light. And they challenged the apostolic origin theory. And it really didn't take off from there until the modern times. Almost all modern scholars today, modern meaning liberal, for lack of a better term, deny John's attestation, the apostles' attestation to the book. Okay? Now the question then becomes, which is right still? Do we know 100% for sure? Say no? No, no one does. So then the question falls on degree of probability. Which one has the better argument?
For is a better argument.
I would argue
Versus against.
the for or the pro argument has a greater backing by it by, first of all, the early Christian witness. Because when we look at canonicity, which is what we're doing, one of the first earmarks of what decided what went into the New Testament or not was it written by an apostle. So if this was just John the Elder, if this John the Schmo, well, he was an apostle, and we have no idea if he was really a close associate of apostle, like Luke was to Paul, or Mark was to Peter. There's no clear indication about that. So again, the burden of evidence for not saying it was John the Apostle really falls on the critic, not on the history. Does that make sense? Now, what's the second one, Rebecca?
Universality.
So what does that mean?
It means how widespread was it?
That's another key factor. You may have never heard of the gospel according to Philip. Right? The reason is that there weren't very many copies of it. Two, it was a Gnostic text. It was written about 150 years after the death of Christ. So it's not a very reliable witness, you know what I'm saying? Versus everything in the New Testament which was written during the time of the apostles alive. Second of all is the fact that we have very few copies of the Gospel of Philip in comparison to the book of Revelation shows that it was widely circulated in the early church, which means that there was an early church recognition of its validity. Third,
Used in liturgy?
that is the key. That's where we get our tradition from. The only reason why we have a Bible at all isn't to, I'm sorry to say, sit around and study it like a scholar would the cast of Amontillado. That's not its purpose. Purpose of the Bible is to give us what is and is not the authentic tradition related to Jesus Christ. The reason why it's in the Bible and the reason why it was so widely recognized is that it was used in the liturgy of the early church. The Gospel of Philip was not. Are you following me here?
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth thing,
Theology.
the theology in the book is consistent with the tradition that was handed on from the apostles to their successors and onward. Those are the fourfold criterion that the early church fathers witnessed to as a sieve to determine what is and is not appropriate to be read in Mass related to the life and teachings of Jesus. So what came first, the church or the Bible?
Church.
The church. The church authenticated the Bible by this criteria. Therefore, sorry, Martin Luther, you're wrong. Has nothing to do with how you feel about the book. I don't feel it's the Word of God. Well, too bad. It is. Now live with it and move on. Why? It's because it had nothing to do with my feelings. It has everything to do with what the tradition was that was handed on to Jesus, to his apostles, and to their successors. This is a faithful witness to that succession. And that's why we read it today. That's why we're studying it at all. That's why we hear it read in Mass. It all has to do with what Jesus originally gave us, passed down to us. Does that make sense? So if you ever ran into Martin Luther on the road and he said, "Why are you studying the book of Revelation? I don't see any value in it," you'll know why. Okay? Now, in all fairness, today no Protestant takes the book out. It's ironic, Martin Luther had such a low opinion of the book of Revelation, but he didn't excise it. So Protestants and Catholics share the same New Testament. They just believe it for different reasons. Our reason, the Catholic reason, is that it faithfully passes down the tradition handed down to us from Christ and the apostles. That is used in our liturgy. Book of Revelation was read in the liturgy. In fact, if you read it carefully, you see liturgical elements to it.